Welcome, everybody, back to Neutrality Studies and to Michael Rossi Policy with,
Yep.
of course, Michael Rossi. Michael, welcome back.
Thank you, Pascal. Good morning. Hope everything is well on you. Happy Saturday. It's a Friday evening here in New York, but busy week we have had.
Oh, yes, a busy week it was indeed. The Iran war is now exactly 1 week old. It started pretty much around this time, Japan time, a little bit, maybe a few hours later.
Yeah.
On your end, I think it was midnight or 1 a.m. in the US when the first strikes
Yep.
hit.
Yep.
So almost a week. Michael, what have we learned in the meantime? And can you maybe give us a little rundown of what you think were the most important things that happened?
Yeah. Well, I had started out our conversation with Ambassador Freeman last time by saying, by paraphrasing that quote by Sophocles, one must wait until evening to see how splendid the day has been. Here we are a week later. One must wait until Saturday to find out how much has been accomplished within the last week. As we were finishing up our conversation last week, I think within like the last 15 minutes or so, it was just coming in through Telegram that Khamenei was
Yeah,
murdered.
yeah.
So as we were talking, I had shut Telegram off because I just didn't want to get all of the, the noise.
Yeah, and Ambassador Freeman was making the point that Khamenei had been declared dead at least 6 times before that during
Exactly.
his 30 years of rule, right? So we
Exactly.
were all very skeptical whether the United States really killed or managed to kill him, but turns out, yes, they did.
They did kill him.
They murdered the official leader of the Iranian state.
And as you and I communicated over on WhatsApp right afterwards, if I'm not mistaken, one of the last major obstacles towards preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons.
The
And
man who put a fatwa on nuclear
yeah,
weapons,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
For forbidding them, saying like they're unholy, they're ungodly, we're not making one. Yeah.
Well, a lot of good that has done it because, the Ayatollah is dead. Long live the Ayatollah. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they selected his son.
He's in the highest ranks, I believe.
Yeah,
And
so
my latest information is that he wasn't yet officially appointed, but that he's basically more or less the agreed candidate.
So if we can understand all of this, first of all, I think the biggest thing to take away from the last week is that contrary to many presumptions within the Trump regime, the Iranian state has not collapsed. There is no regime change. If anybody thought that one could initiate regime change by just simply decapitating the religious symbolic head of a state that is largely run by the Islamic Revolutionary Council, not the Ayatollah, then whatever information that they were being given from whatever diaspora sources, Israeli Mossad sources, they really, really need to check the credibility of these things. Two things I can say is beyond just simply that, there were two really, really good videos that have come out on YouTube, both on our colleague Glenn Deason's page. The first one was shortly before you and I and Ambassador Freeman spoke, was Glenn speaking with Jeffrey Sachs, who had given his initial prognosis by saying that this is going to be a disastrous war for the United States. And one that was within the last 24 hours, it was Glenn was interviewing Douglas Macgregor, which
Right.
is a fascinating. I mean, I just encourage all of our respective viewers to go to Glenn's page and check this out. Macgregor, who is much more on an insider basis from, U.S. military standpoint, is just simply saying that this is Netanyahu's war that Trump and the Trump administration has been dragged into. Trump as an individual is just severely compromised politically, economically, reputationally. And we are being given just all kinds of conflicting reasons, rationales, narratives from Rubio, from Hegseth, over why we are involved in all of this. And I think that initially the understanding was that we could just, go into Iran, throw in some missiles, get them to capitulate, just like we had allegedly thought was going to happen with Venezuela. And it turns out that within this last week, Iran is not only resilient in this war, but has conducted significant amount of damage on American military, economic, oil refinery bases within the Middle East, many areas within the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. So we're talking about Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, among others, have been significantly hit. And what's even more important to note is that, again, I'm still operating in gray zone. We are still operating within the fog of war here, but the amount of devastation and destruction inflicted on Israel is one of the biggest kept secrets out there. Videos coming out on the destruction of places throughout Tel Aviv have been significantly edited, heavily censored. But what we find is really three emerging narratives that could really be anyone's game. We have what the Western media industrial complex wants us to believe, the so-called legacy media, New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, but also Fox News, BBC, Telegraph, Sky News. All of these things are painting pictures that of, Iran is about to collapse, that the U.S. and Israeli coalition is about to achieve full control over Iran's airspace. Another narrative is sort of the gloom and doom prognosis that are coming from many channels on YouTube, specifically,
Right.
Things like, Glenn Deason, among others, and saying that this is just an absolute disastrous war that the United States will not be able to really recover from. And it is being dragged, basically, into Armageddon by Israel. And then the third narrative is what we get from the various Telegram channels that, take them as you will, are a little bit more balanced in the sense that, all three sides are just inflicting heavy damage on each other. However, the thing to take away from all of this is that 1 week in, whatever victories that Trump or Netanyahu thought that they were going to achieve over Iran have now proven to be not reachable in a matter of days, but weeks, if not months. Right now, we're talking about months. Now we're talking about how this war might last until September or October. How convenient, just in time for the midterm elections. So that's basically the long and short of what I can see on my side. What about you? Pascal, you do this wonderful thing where you ask a lot of questions to people who are guests on your channel. No one has ever asked you what you think about all of this. What do you see on your end on all of this? I know I'm all of a sudden preemptively taking over and asking you the same question.
Oh, no worries. I put out my little opinion pieces on my channel whenever I feel that I have something to say. I mean, one of the most important insights for me last week, or one of the most shocking ones, really is that there is a considerable number of people who are involved in this on the US side who are just outright Christian fanatics, like evangelist fanatics. And I don't have any visuals right now, but we've seen it yesterday or the day before yesterday, how there was like a prayer in the Oval Office with Trump's main evangelist, I think White is her name, pastor, who was like there praying with him. And okay, this praying, okay, fine. But Pete Hegseth, I wasn't aware that he actually has two Christian fundamentalist tattoos, one being the Jerusalem cross on his body, and the other one Deus Vult, God wills it.
Yeah,
and that he is actually a very fundamentalist Christian believer in Christian Zionism, and that he has portrayed some of U.S. necessity to go to war actually with this belief of the of bringing about the end days. I mean, that was quite shocking.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to say this right off the
Sure.
bat here, just to get the one thing off. I think it would be absolutely hilarious. I think it would be, I would laugh my rear end off if, in bringing about the second coming of Jesus Christ, he appears in Damascus instead of Jerusalem And if you know what that if you know what that means, it basically is saying that really the Muslims were correct all along.
Uh, no,
As
I keep saying I would laugh the most if he actually appeared in Salt Lake City as it.
That's the other
Damn,
one. Yes,
damn,
him
who
with.
guessed? Who thought?
That would make I mean, look, I mean, we are talking about, evangelical Christianity is kind of like the modern day version of high Episcopalianism in the United
Yeah,
States. It's a state religion that is more or less the religion of the ruling elite. Episcopalianism in the 50s and 60s was what evangelicism is today. But yes, I saw that picture of a number of pseudo Christians praying over their pseudo Messiah. And I mean, it's just absolutely laughable. And, I say this, within the Lenten season as somebody who is a practicing Orthodox Christian, myself. And I mean, it's just, there are times where I really just now understand why we had gladiatorial games with Christians back in the day, just to get rid of some of these annoying individuals. But I mean, it is something in which, yes, there's another thing that I think we can take away from this last week, and that is really a convergence of narratives that have been leading into this all-out war.
yeah. It,
That, as far as Israel is concerned, is this their attempt? Is this their chance of achieving greater Israel? We already see that they have laid claim, like, their own version of Lebensraum, to
yeah.
vast areas of Lebanon and Syria, and coming soon,
And
Sinai. As far as the evangelicals are concerned, a lot in the United States don't give them much credibility, but they do have influence. They
yeah,
do
and
have access to many, many people in politics.
and you know what worries me is not just that a few people in the White House, which is bad enough, share this kind of like lunatic belief, but let me just share this one here with you. The here we go. Like there's this so-called religious, I mean, it's called Military Religious Freedom Foundation,
Mhm.
which is a proper kind of NGO designed by this guy, a Mike Weinstein. I think this is just Mike Weinstein's kind of project, but he's been running it now for many years. And he's as a Jewish former member of the armed forces. It is apparently his goal to keep the forces secular, to say like, no, this cannot be a religious force. I mean, we need to keep religion out of the military. And he created this foundation where people actually can basically call in or write bans and complain when the firewall between religion and the state have been breached within the armed forces. And they put out several articles last week. This is just the latest one that I got yesterday. 30 Democratic Congress members urge DoD Inspector General to investigate MRFF clients' complaints of commanders framing Iran war as an end times prophecy.
Mhm.
That refers to another one that they put out the day before yesterday, or 2-3 days ago, saying that their organization, MRFF is their organization, has been inundated with complaints of gleeful commanders telling troops
Yeah.
Iran war is part of God's divine plan to usher in the return of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
So it's not just the White House; it's actually in the U.S. military forces a good number of commanders or people and officers who share in this belief. And my point in the video that I made was that if this is believed by enough people, then the war is not anymore about rational aims, about nationalist goals, or just defeating Iran, a regime change. Then the war itself becomes a goal, right? The war is in and of itself a good thing to the people who share this view that you need the war, you need the good against evil fight, the final one, in order to get to the second coming of Christ, which then would change the entire rationale. I mean, all the discussion about is it about regime change, is it about the oil, is it about control, is it the neocons, would be kind of out of the window
Mhm.
when this is the main motivation. Now, I don't think this is the only motivation, but it is a significant one, and it might actually have impact on the political decision making.
Yeah. Ultimately, this is about what Netanyahu wants. I mean, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, this is Netanyahu's war. This is a war that Israel has very successfully dragged the United States in. And
Although
to your point,
I'm pretty certain he's not keen on the Messiah coming back. I mean,
he's not.
that
No.
he cannot share that view, right?
No, he's not. But the Licudists, of which Netanyahu has been an active part of since the 1970s, okay, since the moment in which the Israeli state took much more of a Zionistic religious element and tried to justify their existence not as a state, as a place of refuge for the survivors of the Holocaust, but for the alleged descendants of the people of Judea, are always going to find willing and useful idiots in the West, chief and foremost the United States. But they will also find them in Canada, in Australia, in the UK, in Germany, among others. That's why I was saying this is really a convergence of a number of ideas and narratives. What we find, Pascal, and correct me if you think that I'm wrong on all of this, is that the narrative, at least the justification coming from the United States, has changed almost every 24 hours in this last week.
Of course.
The first was that Iran was going to preemptively attack. The second one was that Israel was going to attack Iran. So we, the United States, this was according to Rubio, might as well get in on the fun. Another one was that Iran was going to assassinate Trump. So we had to go and assassinate the Ayatollah. A third one, and there's in no particular order, is that we need to bring freedom and democracy to these poor people who have been oppressed. Of course, this is after we have, bombed a elementary school, and now the death toll is well over 150 children, if not more, including, teachers and other people about it. And then we have, people like Hegseth, who, I mean, at the end of the day, he is a gym bro. I mean, what was his thing before? He was a weekend Fox News host that, drank too much, who has Deus Vult tattooed on, one of his man tits. So he's a trad bro. That's the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a trad bro. Who feels like this is his moment to shine because Rubio apparently had his moment with Venezuela. I mean, we kind of look also at not just Trump. I think Trump is somebody who is perfectly happy making certain that the world can burn down the day after he's buried. I mean, that is ultimately what Trump wants. Trump just simply wants to die outside of a jail cell with as much of his money as possible, and then the rest of the world can be damned. But we find that there are a number of opportunists within the Trump regime, Vance, Rubio, Hegseth, that are trying to cement their legacy by finding some angle in combating Iran. And at the end of the day, and this is another thing that I've gotten from many of the commentaries that I've seen on social media, is that my country is basically run currently by the biggest gaggle of mediocre idiots, sycophants, opportunists that you can ever possibly imagine. We have no long-term plan. Within the video that Glenn and Doug McGregor was talking about, McGregor has said one very important thing: tactics win battles, strategies win wars. I'm quoting directly from Colonel McGregor. And we, the United States, we don't have a strategy. We don't have a strategy. We are operating by the seat of our pants. We are effectively doing Israel's bidding. And Iran, surprisingly, is finding ways of locating the shatter points of many weak links within this U.S.-Israeli GCC coalition as possible. They're fighting a war of attrition. My one thing, and then I'll turn it back over to you, is that the one thing that does not give me any sense of relief that this is going to end humiliatingly for the West, and this is exactly as you pointed out, is that neither Trump nor Netanyahu care a damn about casualties, about infrastructure, about anything. They will absolutely watch as much of the world burn as long as they remain alive on the opposite side of a jail cell.
Yeah, no, the first, on the very first day, Saturday last week, one of the very first targets they struck was a school for little children,
Yes.
a school for little girls, 160 little girls, like
Yeah.
age 7, 8, 9, 10, dying in the very first hours of the war, and this done by either the US or Israel that pride themselves that they're able to pinpoint, target, and kill Ayatollah Khomeini in his home office, or in his home. It's like, oh, we're most precise ever. It's like, yeah, you did this on purpose. You did this on purpose in order to just signal to the Iranians that this is going to be a bloody affair if they do not immediately give up, and that all the civilian infrastructure will be considered, and civilian targets will be considered for a game, and that this is just what we do. We just slaughter your people. Okay, we slaughter them the way that we slaughter people in the Second World War, right? With the fire bombings and so on. This is going to be the name of the game, and it is all justified. It is all justified in the name of fighting evil. And this is just where I also need to show you again this one here, which pisses me off a lot. It's the framing that we're seeing in this legacy media, right? For instance, here, foreign policy, right? Region on edge as Trump signals longer war. How the Gulf countries are responding to Iran's attacks, right? This is one of the current narratives that we see a lot, is like, oh no, Iran is attacking innocent Gulf states in order to spread the war. It's such a dumb narrative, because it's obviously Iran attacks all of the infrastructure that the United States occupies in these places. But this is how it's being spun, especially in Europe. They're so noisy about Iran being like attacking like aggressively Gulf countries, when apparently the idea of these people is that Iran's self-defense should happen against maybe continental United States. I don't know. It's utterly ridiculous, but that's how they try to spin it. Also, that we now see these denials coming out. No, Israel did not compel the US to wage war on Iran, and subtitle of this one even better. It's a convenient argument that echoes an anti-Semitic trope. It's like, really? Really? You're doing this? You're defending Iran here in foreign policy? And I must just say, foreign policy is for people like you and I who work in the foreign policy space. Used to be a very important magazine. I published an article in this about neutrality. It is not completely garbage. I mean, they still put out a couple of good things, right? But the it's just the narrative spin is quite tremendous. So, and I just want to show you one thing, and that's here in Germany. This guy here is called Armin Laschet. He was one of the leaders of the CDU, so of the currently ruling party. Was a first minister of the state of either Bavaria or North Rhine-Westphalia. I think North Rhine-Westphalia, and he's a very important guy, right? And he said in this show here, and in this very primetime German show where serious people discuss serious things, the war in Iran, he comes all out, says like Iran cannot defend itself cannot hide behind international law. International law doesn't apply to Iran because Iran has been breaking international law and has been breaking human rights law for the last 50 years. Therefore, it does not apply to it, and the West has every right and actually obligation to go and help change that regime. Right? Yeah. It's a pretty disgusting kind of approach, but this is now not only sayable. This is actually popular currently in a lot of not all of Europe, but a lot of Europe.
Legacy media industrial complex, however way you want to call it. I mean, I published in Foreign Policy myself a couple of years ago when I had advocated for an enforcement of the Brussels agreement between Belgrade and Pristina over Kosovo, which remains still a frozen conflict. I brought this up last week when we were talking with Ambassador Freeman about within the first 24 hours, I think we could absolutely agree that one of the other major casualties of the war was the rules-based order, or the credibility of the rules-based order. Because if we're going to have countries like Germany, let's
That
be
one has been dead for a while, though.
it has, but anybody that thought that it could be revived, and I have my own colleagues and people on YouTube that still defend it and talk about it, and I get it. I absolutely understand it. I really, really do. But ultimately, liberalism as an IR theory works if and only if the people creating the rules actually follow them themselves. And when they don't, when it becomes arbitrary, I mean, just reach for E.H. Carr's work, The 20 Years Crisis, which was which wrote about the 20-year period between the end of the First World War and the beginning of the Second World War, and just the utter incompetence of the League of Nations, and the way in which the British and the French just literally threw the Czechoslovakian state under the bus for Hitler at Munich. You begin to realize that the rules-based order works when it doesn't involve the Joseph Borrell's garden within the European Union. I'm sort of glad that you brought up the Europe, because there's really only one thing to talk about Europe within this last week, and it just reminds us how utterly irrelevant Europe is to either the Ukraine crisis, to what's happening in Iran. When we talk about Europe effectively saying that Iran aggressively attacked unprovoked all of these other countries, that they are adhering to a narrative that nobody believes in anymore. And this, I think, is also something that we should discuss. Not only here, but I believe that this is something that we really need to devote more time to, and that is the role of narrative, not just in media, but the way in which foreign policy is driven. Western media is absolutely replete with talking about how Iran is the aggressor, and the United States and Israel are responding to this. This is very much in line with embedded liberalism, IR liberalism, as well as constructivism, the way in which a state perceives another state to be. The thing is, Pascal, and I'm sure that you can agree with me on this, is that in the age of social media, in the age of alternative media, not legacy media, not state-controlled media, these narratives no longer hold saliency anymore. We can see what is happening behind the scenes. We can read what is being said behind the podium. We know what is being done. And that does not get the Iranian regime off. It doesn't excuse them for being what they are. But at the same time, nobody believes the United States. Nobody believes the Israeli narrative anymore either. And it's almost as if like the propaganda that is coming out is so amateurishly pathetic. I mentioned last week, they're lying. We know that they're lying. They know that we know that they are lying, but they just don't care. And what it really seems, and I think this is what has, sort of ennobled a lot of commentators on social media, on YouTube over the past week, is how utterly and pathetically transparent the narrative is coming from the West. That they are just looking for some kind of argument that somehow will stick among the population beyond just simply their own political constituents. And even there in the United States, there is a major rupture once more within MAGA. The MAGA movement, which was already significantly fractured over the past couple of weeks, has now absolutely split over this war with Iran and the absolute blind loyalty and sycophantic adherence to whatever Israel says. Trump had effectively disavowed Tucker Carlson as being, ever a member of MAGA. And I think that that's probably the best compliment that Tucker Carlson could ever have given. The more at this point that Trump, besmirches Tucker, the greater his credibility within the media grows. And it's not just him, but it's also people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I'm no fan of. Yeah. But who would have thought, who would have had on their bingo card for 2026 that Marjorie Taylor Greene is more of the voice of reason than Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance, for that matter? And we're only, my friend, in year one of the Trump administration. I don't know if we can afford another 3 years of this.
No, but what we are seeing is actually that also on the conservative side, there are a couple of people who actually stick to their guns, who actually do not change their tune depending on who says or who does something. And
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of them. Tucker Carlson is one of them. Tucker Carlson constantly actually stands up for freedom of speech, right? It doesn't matter whether the people who are censored are from the left or the right, and it doesn't matter whether the topic is Ukraine or Israel, Iran. He
Sure.
actually he does so, and he is very very he is, in my view, a very classic kind of um, U.S. conservative concerned with the good of the nation, right? Just like McGregor, right? They are, for a lack of a better word, like the good type of nationalists, not the nationalists that want to go out and destroy others, but the ones who would like to make America a nice place to live, right? For the
Sure.
Americans at home and keep it safe at home and not abroad. So, and in this sense, like Tucker Carlson actually puts out a lot of very important, not just discussions, but reports. Like the interview that he did with Mike Huckabee was very, very revealing, right?
Well, that was
About how
fantastic. That
Huckabee
was
about how
absolutely
Huckabee is basically a lawyer for Israel and is defending the Zionist cause, not just Israel, but the Zionist cause, and views anything that opposes it as, or portrays it, anything that opposes it as inherently anti-Semitic. So in the same vein, these people are now representing any kind of opposition to the Iran war as basically an anti-Semitic approach, right? Because for some reason it seems that the only thing that saves Israel is preemptively attacking Iran. What surprises me is that, again, what you said, that this age of social media and so on has not yet led to greater protests. I know there are protests
yeah.
in the United States, but we haven't seen anything massive yet. We also haven't seen anything massive in the United States, in Europe, because I remember I was in 2003 in high school in Switzerland, and we had a whole week where there were protests, even in my little city, in my little town of Fribourg, where students would not go to high school but go out on the street and protest. And while there is a considerable you know opposition to the Iran war, that's for sure, there is no mass movements yet, and we have people who call this out very strongly. One of them just published an article in my Substack, Michael von der Schulenburg. He wrote a fantastic essay, A Gateway to Hell: How the War Against Iran Will Harm the West, in which he actually says, like, look, this is going to come back to haunt us. Maybe not as bad as I'm depicting it on this AI generated little Paris on fire. Not that bad, but more in in sense of ruins, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna the devastation that will come from being cut off from these hydrocarbons from the Middle East. The trade, the way that trade is going to be interrupted for potentially a very long time. And again, if the trade routes in the Middle East are impeded, and if the United States cannot get its hands on the right kind of crude, then even in the US will be forced to somehow restrict the export of its crude, and that will, over the long term, or not just the long term, over the short and medium term, lead to less hydrocarbons for the Europeans, and they just cut themselves off the oil and the gas from Russia, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Europe is now in a position where it will potentially lose all access to major sources of hydrocarbons,
Mhm.
and they still support that. And then they get angry that a drone actually struck a UK airbase in Cyprus, a member of the EU, right? I mean, this war is spreading. They are all blaming Iran for it, but everybody with eyes to see and ears to hear understands that this is the doing of the United States of
Yeah.
America, together with Israel. Who egged on who is maybe a question to be answered definitively in a couple of years from now. I think it's pretty clear that it was Netanyahu who egged on the U.S. president, but there are different views on that one. But the fact is, it's this coalition war of these two states that are in a very tight symbiosis, however, against Iran, right? And the Europeans now playing along, the NATO General Secretary coming out, Mark Rutte, and saying that there will be full support, right, for, as they frame it at the moment, defensive action. Like, we will help to all defensive action. The Europeans at the moment think that in a war of aggression that you still can have a defensive component, and that's how they try to sell it to the masses at the moment. And what surprises me is that there's no mass protests yet, because that's what we would need, in the same way that there were mass protests about Gaza. Although, I mean, Gaza was and is a genocide. The war against Iran, so far at least, hasn't reached that level yet, but it is pretty devastating. It's very bad.
Well, I mean, what we can call, and I'm looking to see what we can call this. I've settled on the Persian Epsteinian Wars. That's probably a good way of looking at it. The Persian Epsteinian Wars. It basically is a country like Iran that has been grossly underestimated for its resilience and its preparedness. I think in many cases, the Trump and Netanyahu regimes had thought that by coaxing Iran into a negotiated settlement that they could effectively sucker punch the country and get them to, completely keel over. No. This is a country that has, first of all, learned its lesson, if there was any lesson to be learned from the 12-day war from last year. And that ultimately the people that really run the country is the Iranian Revolutionary Council, not some Ayatollah that speaks on behalf of, at least the religious element of the country. One thing I can say about Europe is that I feel that the public backlash against all of this will most likely manifest itself in Europe first, before the United States, for a couple of reasons. Number one, most of continental Europe operates on a parliamentary democratic system, which means that there is more than two political parties. The opportunity for there to be more of a voice within the political sphere, beyond your compromise Christian Dems and social Dems, is likely to manifest either in, most likely when it comes to Central Europe, more national populist parties like the Orbáns and the Ficos and the Babices, in the Czech Republic. We may see, I'm not putting any money on this, but we may see certainly a crisis in Germany where AfD all of a sudden ends up with a plurality in the next parliamentary election. We may see Marine Le Pen's National Front Party. Again, don't quote me on any of this, but it does put a significant pressure on the centrist transatlantic parties to either form 3-4-way coalition governments to blackball these parties out, or to find some way around it, because many Europeans are coming to realize, look, the governments and the leadership may want one thing, but we are asking, why is this so important? In the same way that we find in many Arab countries, the Arab governments will march in lockstep with Washington and Tel Aviv. They have been absolutely vassalized. But the people are beginning to wonder why. When it comes to the United States, on the other hand, I have to just draw out my inner Leninist. This is the reason why I tell my students, you see, there's a reason why we don't do revolution anymore, because nobody reads Lenin. And that is, protest is one thing. Organized opposition, but that doesn't do anything other than just show people that you're upset with things, does not challenge the political leadership. There needs to be organized opposition, leadership, and actual mobilization within the electoral process. That's the reason why whenever there is something like this, and they come out in small elements, whether it's a Bernie Sanders or a Rashida Tlaib or a Zohran Mamdani, it scares the establishment. It absolutely scares. It scares an establishment that is basically still living within Cold War mentality. And that is both Republicans and Democrats. Please think, if the Trump regime is, turned into a lame duck government with midterm elections, we need to understand that there are enough people within the Democratic Party that will absolutely do everything possible to give Israel immunity at the United Nations and whatever they demand as far as military and economic surplus. Israel will go bankrupt a week after the United States does. And
It's
we will
just
bankrupt ourselves in order to keep that state going.
it's just I'm not sure anymore whether these individuals, Mamdani, Rashida Tlaib or so, whether even potentially they could have a proper impact, because what we've seen over the past, I'm sorry, like 40-50 years is just that whoever gets elected to office in the United States, at the end of the day, when push comes to shove and on very important topics, they all fall in line. They all fall in line, and like
Yeah.
exhibit number one is of course Donald Trump himself, running, like explicitly running against more forever wars, running against the war with Iran, running for an end of the Ukraine war. And not only did he not achieve it, he starts gleefully the new one, right? And then we read a post on Instagram by Kamala Harris saying, I oppose the Iran war, are very, very bad. It's like, come on. No, I mean, who in their right mind would believe that you wouldn't have done exactly the same or even worse?
Absolutely.
So in a sense, like, the US as a political system, the way that it is set up, also with this Guardian railroads, rail lines, right? The
gatekeepers.
the gatekeepers, the two parties, that then nominate people also for the presidency through an internal process with the primaries and so on. I mean, all of this is a filtering mechanism, and even if somebody slips through, let's say like Trump, there's a million ways or 7 ways till Sunday to bring them back in line, right? With various methods. I think I said that last week. I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump himself was actually physically threatened into doing this, because it seems so against his own interest with his MAGA base, right?
Yeah.
Because he built his MAGA base over years, and he did so successfully, and he did have at least on the surface a message of not using this kind of foreign bellicose foreign policy, and all of that is now out, right? It's never going to come back. But still, the sad conclusion then is that whatever the input into the system, the output is basically already determined. And I don't want to be fatalist here.
Yeah.
It's just, I wonder if the way that the political system works, if there's actually a real world impact these kind of individuals can have on the output of the system.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, I don't want the viewers to think that people like Rashida Tlaib or Zohran Mamdani is suddenly going to be the next Lenin or Mao or Ho Chi Minh. No, I mean, absolutely not. There is an element of fatalism that I have been reaffirmed over the past couple of days as well, and I absolutely agree with you. But I do have a couple of things here I don't know whether this is going to make people optimistic and hope, or whether it's just, why bother getting up in the morning? Right now, as far as the assessments that have been said about U.S. Israeli capabilities versus Iran, whether it is McGregor, Professor Sachs, among others, right? They're all saying that this is an absolute disaster as far as the United States. The U.S. has lost a significant amount of resources and money in military bases, naval bases. These bases are up in flames. We will never be able to come back to the Middle East anytime soon. We've lost our credibility. All of this is predicated on the assumption that my country's leadership is rational and sane and will realize that this is a disaster, and they will cut their losses and leave.
And that's Trump, not a given.
No, it won't. No, it is not. No, it is not. And it is not just Trump. Getting rid of Trump is not going to all of a sudden make things better. Everybody in Trump's Führer bunker, for lack of better word, is in it to the end. They are either apocalyptics, they are absolute collapsing narcissists, they are opportunists who don't give a damn about the number of deaths. And by the way, right now we are promoting we're publishing only 4 deaths out of all of these strikes. We know that there is a lot more. We absolutely know that there's a lot more. And these 4 deaths are effectively being used by the Trump regime as a way of justifying the need to continue the war against Iran. A country, might I add, as I'm sure that you know, has been billed in the United States as public enemy number 1. There are just, we look at countries with adjectives. So as far as that's concerned, we are not going to just simply pack up and leave like a war of attrition. I think that is the biggest problem that I see in many of these pessimistic diagnoses, is that Iran is fighting a war of attrition. That may very well be the case. Iran may very well succeed in driving the U.S. into an economic downward spiral. They may end up creating a situation with Israel in which they may very well opt for the Samson directive, in which case, if that's the case, if Israel's going down, they will drag the United States down with them. Donald Trump will be dead before that doomsday scenario happens. And that is something that many people need to understand, is that when the country is led by people who do not care what happens the day after they die, all of this is nothing more than just easily acceptable collateral. Trump almost did his own little, Lord Farquhar from the first Shrek movie a couple of days ago. Some of you may die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. I mean, he literally was almost, went that far to say, So did
it's normal. It's what happens in war. It's like, wow. You're like, it's normal that our soldiers will die in a war of choice that I
so
ordered.
We need to understand this. The other thing to bring up, and this is, I don't know whether this is like the one silver lining in the cloud, but over the past 2 years, it has become painfully obvious, and this is especially true with social media, right? The narrative provided in Western press about the state of Israel has been sanitized at best. When you have 2 years of sustained state-sponsored genocide against Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but also in West Bank, when you have their leaders brazenly and unapologetically talking about creating a greater Israeli state at the absolute expense of Arabs, both Christian and Muslim, not just Palestinians, but Lebanese, Syrians, maybe even Egyptians. Younger generations don't buy into this older Cold War narrative. Within the last week, 2 significant Republicans, one of them was, why am I blanking on his name? He's from Texas, the guy with the eye patch. He lost the primary.
Right.
He lost the primary because at this point, it is a significant political liability for you to take AIPAC money, for you to say, I am America first, but if America first is Israel before America, that's a liability. Interestingly enough, it is coming on both the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party. This means a couple of things. One, the older generation that took the Cold War narrative at face value is being replaced. They're dying out. Younger generations who have little to no optimism in this so-called American dream and see that their tax dollars are going to countries around the world to murder people. If you want healthcare, go to Israel. You can get the healthcare that you want there. America pays for it.
Or go to the U.S. military and then you get healthcare, but you also might die in the middle.
No, that's the other thing. No,
oh, really?
U.S. military recruitment is having a major problem. They cannot meet the numbers anymore.
Oh, I'm so glad.
They cannot meet the numbers anymore. I have had over the years a number of students, undergraduate, grad students, they have served in the military, they've done their duty, they did their thing, and they realize afterwards that they are just not being given the support, the necessary institutional support that they have. The VA clinics are horribly understaffed. And in many situations, the military, just a couple of days ago, there was a decorated U.S. Marine that was forced out of a room. He was basically saying, American soldiers should not die for Israel. And, he had his hand broken. These are the same people, the people that forced him out, the people that broke his hand, and the people that are, chanting, God bless the troops, support the troops, God bless the troops. The troops are nothing more than a symbolic cardboard cutout When you actually talk about them, when you actually talk to them and you realize what they go through afterwards. I had a student, this is what has come to my head. This is a long time ago. I had a student of mine many, many years ago. He served multiple rounds in Afghanistan. His job, if you can believe this, was driving a fortified Humvee at the beginning of a convoy. His job was literally to be the one to take the landmine hit. So the people behind him, and I looked at him at one point, and I remember this. I was sitting in office hours at one point. I looked at him and I said, "How many times were you blown ass over elbow?" And he said, "So many times that by the third or fourth time, I started laughing as I was literally ass over elbow being, it's sort of like, this is what you're dealing with. This is what you're effectively dealing with."
Look, I propose a new term for U.S. military personnel. Molar, meat of last resort. It's the meat. It's the meat for the meat grinder that you use once the meat of the proxies has kind of dried up, right? Once you have no more Ukrainians to run and rush against the Russians, once you kind of ran out of proxies in the Middle East, right? I mean, right now, and maybe we need to mention this because right now the talk in the media is that the US is building up two fronts: the Kurds in the north, in one part of the north of Iran, I mean, in Iraq. And the other ones is the Azerbaijanis. Apparently, the Azerbaijani army has been mobilized to the front. And wait, maybe we can actually quickly look at a map here, just in order to get an idea where that is, right? So. Right. I mean, if both of them are true, and you have now a buildup of Kurds, probably somewhere around this area over here in northeastern Iraq, and Azerbaijan over here. So what we are looking at is a potential strategy of a second phase. And let me just say this: Donald Trump already made it clear that there are going to be several phases of this war, and the bombing campaign is just the first mellowing down and attrition of Iranian defense systems and taking out of military nodes. That's how they look at it. And then the second phase might very well be a ground invasion from these proxies. But once these proxies run out, or if these proxies are not able to do their job well enough, well, the next, you're going to get to the meat of last resort, right? Yeah. And that's gonna be U.S. troops. And then again, you got people blown up. Poor people somewhere from, I don't know, the Bronx or wherever, who then are asked to go and die, and then they get a nice flag over their coffins, a clapping, and their mother gets like a certificate to hang at the wall, and that's it.
Yeah,
it's a pretty crappy deal.
Yes, or if they come back to the United States, they run the risk of being deported by ICE.
Yeah, deported by ICE or linger somewhere on a sidewalk with only one leg and begging for a bit of money. I mean, it's really disgusting.
It's something that, let's say, social media, the non-legacy media, is now spreading, right? These ideas, this sentiment, which it's not that this is a new trend, but this is something that just was never reported on beforehand, is being disseminated. One thing I can say about Trump's decision to all of a sudden start putting together Kurdish or Azerbaijani forces, the Kurds to this point are not taking the bait. I think that they have come. I don't. You know what? If the Kurds do take the bait, I hate to say this. I really hate to say this. If the Kurds take the bait, then they really do not deserve a state of their own. I don't see how the Kurds can do anything in Iran. They don't. That's not really their historical home. Syria, yes. Iraq, yes. Turkey, yes. Azerbaijan, different story. There are a lot of Azeris in northwestern Iran. Aliyev he works quite well with the Israeli state. I would say that would be incredibly risky for him to do. Absolutely risky for him to do. But I would not put it past. I would absolutely not put it past elements within the West to attempt to balkanize Iran, because this is one of those last minute, okay, I'm not even interested in regime change, which we have to be very careful here. A lot of people are saying, well, I've seen this before. This is, the Gulf War in 2002, 2003. But it's just like a horrible reboot. It's a horrible fanfic. As much as I despise people like Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld, they had some kind of objective in mind Trump, Hegseth, Rubio, they talk a lot. But at the end of the day, if there is one thing that we know that this administration is set on, it's just simply sowing chaos. They are not interested in regime change. They're not interested in, if they can achieve it, fantastic, but they're not going to do that. If they can just simply destroy the state from within, burn it down as much as possible, do what Syria is, and capitalize on the rest. You need to understand, everybody needs to understand, as far as the Trump administration is concerned, destroyed American military bases, wasted missiles. How many does it take to shoot down an Iranian missile? This justifies his $1.x trillion military spending budget for next year. As far as they're concerned, there is money to be made. The military-industrial complex is absolutely going to love this. And if we can use this splendid little war to get rid of all of our outdated Cold War era, post-Cold War 2000, armaments, whatever, so we can then update everything, just like we're telling Europe, good, get rid of your Cold War stuff. Give it to the Ukrainians, let them, figure out how it works. You still need to, replenish your military armaments if you're going to be part of NATO. This is great as far as Lockheed Martin, McDonnell Douglas, Raytheon. I mean, Raytheon does what Raytheon does best. It improves the stock portfolio of its shareholders.
Although I must say I've had talks in the last couple of weeks, including with people in what's it called in California, the big production and nuke production facility, not Palo Alto, I forgot. But anyhow, the point was, he said that the United States over the last 30, 40 years actually lost quite a bit of productive capacity, even in the weapons sphere, because the way that this highly crony capitalism works is it makes all of these weapons much more expensive, and even Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are not able to churn out as much as the United States would actually need to properly replenish. So in a sense, but that's something that's not to the concern of the people who take these decisions, because they don't know, right? So this is one of the things that gives me hope, that the US, out of the system it has in place, is not capable of producing enough implements of war that would be needed in order to fight all of these war everywhere. So this is a piece of hope, and if true, then I think the best Iranian strategy at the moment is to just try to make it physically impossible for the United States to continue striking, right? Because they run out of ammunition. But it also means that they need to absorb all of that, and that comes at a very, very terrible human cost, right?
But this is what happens when you are defending your own territory. I mean, look, the Americans did this to the British in the War of Independence. How do you fight against an enemy that is militarily superior in every aspect? You got to get them tired.
Right.
The Vietnamese did it to the Americans. They also did it to the French. The Afghans, the Taliban,
did it to the Soviets and the Americans.
Yes, but what this all rests on is the rationality of the side that is dealing with the attrition to realize this is a losing battle, right? This is a losing battle. Nixon was campaigning, if I get elected, we're going to end this war in Vietnam, which in a way he did. Okay, he did.
But losing battle is also predicated on the people implementing it wanting to win something, right? If the Christian fanatics are there and they're just happy at the warfare and at the death and the destruction, then then we have a different level of problems, and I don't know how to actually approach that one.
If, let's say, Iran, and there is no guarantee that this is going to happen because that window of opportunity closed last week. But let's just hypothetically envision that during these negotiated talks that, proved to be absolutely nothing because Israel had decided that they were going to attack Iran anyway. But if these talks actually produce something, and the agreement was, hypothetically speaking, Iran is allowed to exist in its current form, its current government, whatever. It relinquishes any and all support, control, influence, financing over Hezbollah or any of these other paramilitary organizations in the Levant. It effectively allows Israel to exist. It turns its attention towards BRICS, towards Shanghai cooperation, towards One Belt, One Road. It is sort of a modus vivendi. This is something that Trump might have been, in his own way, might have accepted. But what we realize over the past couple of days is that Trump is not the person, he is not autonomous in this at all. What we have found is that the upper echelons of American leadership is largely determined by what happens in Tel Aviv. People are complaining that Trump did not get congressional approval to launch this war. I counter that. He absolutely did. The Knesset absolutely okayed that. That's his congressional approval.
Thank you, Michael. It's just such a, the way the US Constitution is built, it's made exactly to kind of prevent such decisions of lone warriors to go to war, but then being able to just go circumvent it and just use this kind of might. It's just horrible, because it's obviously against the ideas even of the of Washington, of Jefferson, and so on. I mean, this is not how war should happen. And of course, nowadays, this is, I mean, war shouldn't happen at all, just to put that there. But the way that it is then politically done, and how we can clearly see, all of the visits of Netanyahu to the White House. I mean, come on, he didn't just go there to drink tea, right?
No.
It's obvious since 1996. It's obvious that this is one of the wars that they want, and they got them. I just want to maybe, the last 5 to 10 minutes, again, like turn a little bit to the future. I mean, the amassing of troops in Azerbaijan. I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. I've just read a couple of articles that this is happening, but I don't know how likely it is. I mean, Aliyev, is he that crazy? And the Kurds, I just want to add like one observation. I'll read it out. I got this in a long message from a colleague of mine from the region, a researcher who knows this well, and his assessment is that the issue with Iraqi Kurds is that they are economically dependent on both Iran and Turkey, and neither of these countries would be happy if the US were to arm Iranian Kurdish groups. That would create enormous pressure on the Kurdish regional governments. And for everybody watching, the Kurds are dispersed among all of these different countries, including Syria, including Iraq, including a little bit in Iran, including are they in other places? I mean, this is Turkey, of course, right? They're in all of those. They're about 25 million. It's a huge group. It's a huge ethnic group, and it's an ethnic group that is not determined by religion. There's Christian Kurds, there's Muslim Kurds, there is they have other like religious denominations. There is the Kurds are really a fascinating kind of ethnic group. Even the word ethnic is kind of something that the researchers actually talk about. And then he goes on that now we are talking about Iran, which has a very large ground army, and IRGC, which already fought Kurdish insurgents in the 1980s and has since become far more institutionalized and better equipped. Any Kurdish mobilization in Iran would therefore be a very serious risk for both Iranian and Iraqi Kurdish actors. So he judges the Kurdish involvement as less likely, which is not to say that the CIA might not succeed in, deploying a couple of thousand Kurdish fighters to go in there and wreak havoc, right? That's already something very strong if you manage to get a couple of thousand people and then just run amok in these cities, because it would draw the Iranian forces into this kind of ground fight, which then the US might again use in a air campaign to bomb them and so on. So there might be several strategies, and especially if Azerbaijan gets involved. And can you tell me more? Do you know how powerful Azerbaijan is as a military? And let's say it got all of the US support it could ask for. The US tells it, don't worry, we will bomb them, and you just go in and you take city after city, and you go to some places like, the largest kind of Azerbaijani city, like here, Tabriz. This could be a main goal, right? To march down here, and the main ethnicity here is actually Azeri, same as Azerbaijan, right? They speak a Turkic dialect and so on. Like that could be a goal in order to kind of start nipping away on Iran. How do you see this?
I mean, it's possible. It is also something that, okay, let's start with the Kurds. We know for one thing, the Kurds do something outside of where they're supposed to be doing something, and Erdogan mobilizes the Turkish army. That there's just no question about that. if the Kurds, as I said, take the bait, and right now they're not. We hear some stories that they have already crossed into Iran. Good luck going against a country of 93 million people, especially in a country where you don't have any real historical positions in, aside from maybe a few border villages. So I'm not all that worried about the Kurdish contingency. The Azeri one, on the other hand, is something that if Aliyev does, this is not Nagorno-Karabakh. This is not Armenian separatists. This is Iran. And unless Azerbaijan is given support, carte blanche from Turkey, they're not going to do it. They won't. This is not something that they can afford to do. Quite honestly, they are already in a significant amount of debt to Turkey for taking back Karabakh. So as much as they like to think that this was a major victory a couple of years ago in reclaiming a part of their territory, they are not economically in a position to sustain a long, protracted war, especially if they're going to occupy territory in another country.
Yeah, but I see a way in which the United States can sell this. How the US can sell this to a couple of thousand Kurds, and how it can sell it to Aliyev to say, like, just do it. Because at the end, it doesn't matter whether they win or not, right? The only thing that's important is that they wreak enough havoc to weaken Iran, right? Because it's also from the US side probably going to be a war of attrition, right? So just enlist more meat.
Sure.
Not meat of last resort, but meat of first choice, right? And then send in the meat and the dying.
If you have no problem being part of the meat grinder, then have at it. Have at it. But I could be wrong. I mean, I could be very, very wrong, but I do not see this doing anything other than just simply creating havoc within Iran.
Yeah, but that's the goal. I think that is the
goal. If that's the goal, then what we have to really look at is that it's the beginning of March. As much as I hate to constantly say that all of this is determined by elections in my country, it is determined by elections. Trump really has, what are we now in March? Trump has what, 5 months, 6 months, 6 months left before the midterm elections, which could very well see him completely compromised within both the House and the Senate. This, of course, presupposes that the Democrats are going to do something other than do nothing. It remains to be seen. But it goes back to, I will acknowledge what you pointed out is what I had said before. Do not expect either Trump or Netanyahu to give up easily. They will not. They will pull out all stops, and they have absolutely no problem sending as many people to the slaughter as possible, simply to avoid dying in a jail cell.
Yeah, no, that certainly won't happen. Good. Michael Rossi, I think this was quite good. I'm glad we got to catch up on this. We'll do this again in the near future. I mean, maybe on a weekly basis, but we'll see. I mean, to get some reviews going of what happened. I think it's worth. I mean, we need to observe this, and we need to figure out how to ruin the parade of the people who want this war. It's absolutely disgusting. If this ends with a total victory of the people who started this by choice, then I mean the future with Russia and China look pretty bleak to me. But if it stops here,
we didn't bring that in. We didn't talk about what Russia and China are doing, what they're not doing, what they might do in all of this. There is always the idea that if it looks like Iran is about to collapse, Russia and China might mobilize. They cannot afford to lose Iran as a reliable partner. I would say, just before we go, there is, and I've done this before, right? A couple of books that I would absolutely recommend our viewers to look at. This is a bit outdated, but it is very much prescient today. Stephen Kinzer's Overthrow, which is a phenomenal study of American-led regime change, starting from the overthrow of the monarchy in Hawaii all the way up to the Second Gulf War in Iraq. Excellent book, very readable. Stephen Waltz, The Hell of Good Intentions, America's Foreign Policy Elite, and the Decline of U.S. Primacy. Also very, very good. And this was very controversial when it came out. We did talk about it last week, but Mearsheimer and Walt's book, The Israeli Lobby, and U.S. Foreign Policy. And finally, one thing that I would also recommend viewers to do is look up this, relationship between unipolarism and multipolarism. There have been some great things written about this by Christopher Lane, Layne. He's a well-respected IR scholar. He wrote this article back in 1995 called The Unipolar Illusion, which talks about how unipolarism is operating only on borrowed time, and it sows the seeds of its own demise. Now, many would regard the world today as definitively multipolar, of which the United States would be a part of. There are members of the U.S. government, both Republican and Democrat, that are doing everything possible to make certain that we still remain unipolar or try to regain that. And it is only going to accelerate that decline. So with the assessments provided by Jeff Sachs, by Doug McGregor, by you and I, by others on YouTube this past week, all of this points to that the U.S. may succeed in a Pyrrhic victory, but it is going to be a disastrous victory indeed for the U.S. and for the Western powers. Happy March.
Happy March, everybody. That was Michael Rossi, Policy. Subscribe to his channel and my channel too if you're watching it on his channel, because we're sharing the video. So, Michael, thank you for your time today.
Looking forward to it next time, Pascal.